everybody, I'm Tom Vessel.
I'm Joy Evans.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
Today we're taking a look at this giant game called Andromeda's Edge. Now, to be clear, this is the deluxe version. The retail version is not quite half this high, but just a little bit over it. It's a much more manageable box, although you are not having as many cool bad guy miniatures. But even this box, there's a lot of space in it. We'll talk about that in a bit. Andromeda's Edge is the sequel to Dwellings of Eldervale. Mike's #1 game one year, and then still pretty high up there, right, Mike?
It's way up there. It's been overtaken by Raw, but it's still in the top 5, I'm almost sure.
And this game is really close. Dwellings of Eldervale is a fantasy-esque game. This game has a lot of similarities to the point where I would say it's at least, let's say, 2/3 the same game, maybe, with a very different theme. And it's going to be more refined because Dwellings of Eldervale has been out for several years, so they know how to streamline some things. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I was saying it's kind of like a 1.5. It definitely has much more shared DNA than not.
All right, well, let me give you a brief overview, and we'll be right back. We're not going to be able to go over everything, but I want to give you some idea of what's going on. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to take a board with their color. You're going to pick from some factions. These factions will tell you your starting resources, and you'll keep your resources in these different spots on the board. So here's ice and nanocarbon and some energy, and then you'll place that there. This shows you a couple tracks that you move up on at the beginning of the game, a special upgrade you have, and some special rules that you have. Each player also has a couple of these modules already built into their board: primary reactor, shipwright, treasury, and architect, as well as dice of their color. There's a lot going on in this game, and I'm not showing you everything like I said, but you have a universe down here of different spots, and on your turn, you're going to be able to place one of these ships that you have onto the board, and then after that, you're going to be able to place ships on the board a distance from a ship that you already have. And each ship that you have, they have a combat number, and they also have how far away from other ships they can go. If you go into a spot with another ship, there will be a battle, and we'll talk about battles in a bit. But you get to take the actions of these spots. Now, many of these spots on the board will have a pile of moons on them, and these moons will be based on what kind of spot it is. There's like each of these has a color, and so there will be a pile of moons there, and you can take that moon. Now, what that moon lets you do is you can immediately spend it or save it and spend it anytime you want, because on your board you'll have a spot to put moons, and you can spend these to get those resources. Or you can plug these moons in. One of the moons can be plugged into this spot here, and whenever you lose a battle, normally you get a card. Or I can say whenever I lose a battle, I get one of these 2 resources, or I get a victory point, something like that. You also have an option to plug them into different modules that you have on your board. If you put 2 modules together with half, you can put a moon in them and get those bonuses when you activate both of those modules. So you have to kind of figure out what you want to do with these moons. That's one thing you're doing on the board. Other spots on the board here are going to let you build bases, which is a big chunk of the game. They're going to let you get more modules. Each of these modules has costs up here. You'll be able to take these modules and you'll place them next to your board. So you have different modules. Each of these rows can have a different color in it, although there are purple modules that can go in any. Now, why do you have these modules? Well, this is a big important part of the game. Instead of placing your ships out on the board, you can pull your ships back off the board. When you do that, you will place each of your ships on modules that you have, getting those bonuses. This one here, for example, gives some money. This one lets you build a base. This one lets you repair a ship or build a new ship. This one here gives you energy. But also energy is important because you can spend energy to activate ones even if you don't have enough ships to put on them. Because as time goes by, you can see all these modules up here. You can have a whole array of modules next to here. And as you pull their ships back, you're going to get those bonuses. Whenever you buy modules, you go up these tracks, and other things will let you move up these tracks too, which are going to give you various bonuses. Some of them will cause events to happen. Some of them will move you up on levels, which will make your buildings worth more points at the end of the game. If you move up on this track, your resources are worth points at the end of the game. If you move on this track, your hand of cards will increase. And speaking of cards, there is so many different cards that you can use in this game. Some are good for battle. Some are used for diplomacy, something you can use before battle. Some of them just let you take a really cool action. You can even discard these as resources. The middle track you move up every time you win a battle, and you'll get points. And there's also tokens that will be on these boards that you will get and receive extra benefits for moving up on this one and on the technological one. And so also at the end of the game, where you are on these is going to score you points. And when an event happens, points can be scored. Anytime you get to one of those exclamation points, this marker is going to be moving around this track. And when it gets to the end, an event will go off. And you'll have a different deck based on how bad you want events to be in this game. And so you'll turn over an event card, and it will show you which track is going to score. So players will score for one of their tracks, minus for modules that have damage on them. Some modules start with damage on them. Some things will damage modules, and you can spend actions to repair modules. And then there will be a special effect here that happens, and more importantly, you'll see A here. Now, that's important because at the beginning of the game, you're either going to pick or randomly select some of these spaceships, and each of these is going to be basically an NPC enemy ship that's going to be on the board. And these enemy ships range from this cool thing to this snake in a brain to whatever this cloud is, to this giant globe machine here. And these go around and they'll fight you, but you can also fight back against them and defeat them. This is my favorite, the Hive ship, which has little hornets coming out of it. And so these will be moving around and you're going to be fighting them on the board. So speaking of battle, let's talk about that. In battle, you can move ships as long as they're within range. They can move into the spot and fight whenever there's a battle. Each person can play one diplomacy card and do whatever it says. You then determine how many battle dice. Your ships will give you dice, but you can spend energy to get you more dice. And you're also going to figure out your targeting value, which is often equal to the number of your ships, but other things might affect your targeting value. So let's say my targeting value is 4, and so I'm fighting an NPC. They roll 3 dice, and I'm rolling 4. My targeting value is 4. That means any dice that are under 4, I get to re-roll. We then line up all the dice like this. Highest die wins. If there is a tie, you go to the second highest die, etc. Combat's quick, it's easy, it's simple. The loser ships will, unless it's a battleship, will get damaged, and many of them are sent to the scrapyard, where they will come back to you, but you won't be able to use them to activate modules, or you can repair them, and then they'll come back and activate modules later on. There's some more things beyond that, but that's a pretty fast way of how combat works. It's pretty simple and easy. You may have noticed these little purple dudes laying around. These are leaders, and you will start with one leader, but your ships will get more of them. And one of the things that you are trying to do in this game, and this is one of the major parts of the game, is you are trying to build these various buildings. Like here's an observatory on the board. Each building gets built in a very specific place, and you're going to need leaders to be built into that. Maybe this is the science center. So you put the leaders in, and you're going to score points for leaders that are in adjacent areas to it. And at the end of the game, it's going to be worth points. So for example, this, a spaceport, that's what it's called. It gives you a one-time ability you can use at the end of the game. But this building is going to be worth 10, 7, or 5, depending on how far I am on this yellow track at the end of the game. Now, there's scoring that's going to happen from events, and there's scoring whenever you build the buildings. You can pick basically the length of your game, pick a number, and as soon as someone gets there, you will finish up and do final scoring, which includes all your tracks, and essentially will likely double the amount of points that you have. Then you have endgame scoring cards, a lot of different things. And there's more involved in this game. There's ways that these are these tiles that you can place on your ships to upgrade them and give them various special abilities, and your faction themselves will come with a special ship that only you have. And even these are going to be different from player to player. There's lots more going on, but essentially what the game is, placing workers on the board, taking actions, trading resources, or pulling them off the board, placing them here on your modules and activating them, getting resources, and then going back out again. Fighting other players, other ships, exploring nebulas to get weird moons, or seeing the top cards in the event deck to manipulate scoring. After you play for a bit, it all comes together in a pretty simple way, and whoever has the most points is the winner. Okay, so let's talk about components first. The game itself, and again, I've only played with the deluxe, although I know the differences. There's just, instead of wooden discs, there's cardboard discs, and there is the big giant plastic miniatures, which, as I showed some in the video, are amazing. And then there's the game trays. But I just want to go on record. I think the game trays in this box, with the exception of the ones that hold the resources, suck. I think they're terrible. I think they take up way too much room. Particularly the player boards are awful. Even people who say it's good, don't use those player boards, the player containers.
Right.
They hold your pieces, and you're like, I'm supposed to put this on my board, but it makes my board look ugly now. And I don't even need these. So anyway, that's just my opinion. But I'll tell you this: I took them out and bagged stuff, and this I think I could fit the deluxe game in the regular box. I could come really close.
Right.
I wouldn't disagree that this is not the best implementation of game trays I've ever seen. I don't see it as big of an issue as you do, but I understand what you're getting at. It definitely could have been a smaller box. I also agree that the player trays, not necessary. Also, the card trays, not really necessary either. But I just don't see it as big of a deal. I mean, I guess maybe cost-wise, if it could have really significantly lowered the cost, then that might be something to think about.
I think that's what it is for me. It's cost, and not just that. Again, for me, box size is an issue. Mm-hmm. It is a pretty big thing. I would like to have this in a slightly smaller box. That being said, though, I don't want to take away from how amazing the rest of this game is. And in particular, even though I said the deluxe version, has some miniatures, the miniatures, I just want to put out the miniatures for the buildings you can build and how they fit over your ships.
So clever.
They basically turn I didn't go over this in the overview, but they turn one of your ships, not one of your big ships, one of your smaller ships, into a building. And it fits in well, and the way your leaders fit in, it just looks, it's crazy engineering, and anything I said negative about the game trays has been offset by how awesome those buildings are.
And it's not only that, it's satisfying to have your leader have another purpose, to put it out there, and it's like, man, it feels so good. And on top of that, the minis, the ships, it's almost like I don't want to paint them. They already look complete the way they are. A lot of those, just like that one of the Brainiac one looking. It's like everything just they look so good.
Yeah, these are some of the best minis functionally and aesthetically that I've ever seen. I love the fact that it actually helps you understand kind of what's happening too, because the leaders fit into those buildings. So you know exactly how many leaders it takes because you can see how many spots are on them. The ships, as you said, become a base, and it's just such a satisfying feeling when you kind of put one of those together. And what it's doing is, kind of re-implementing what happened in Dwellings of Eldervale, where one of your workers would become the base for a dwelling. It no longer is a worker now it's a dwelling. You put the little roof on top, which was also cool, but this just takes that to a exponential level of function and form.
Yeah, so this really is helpful. I find that, a negative about this game, sort of a negative, is your first time playing through, that setup is going to take you a really long time. Right. It's going to take you a long time to sort everything out. And even when you know the game, setup's a bit of a bear. And the rule book, going through it, figuring everything out, especially if you kickstart it, you got to separate out all the extra stuff, which is always kind of a pain. But there's a lot going on. But once you start playing, the iconography, the cards, how the game works, I didn't have to keep wondering how things did it. The way the game is produced focuses on helping me play the game.
It is such for a Euro with so much theme. This has.
So you're saying it's a Euro?
It's a Euro. I mean, I have no problem. I love the mechanics of Euros. I love when they have theme, and this has, I think, both. I mean, such a simple turn. I think you either have like the launch or the return to station or whatever they call the regroup, and that's it. And that's, man, it's so simple to dive into this, which is impressive for a game of this size.
I'd call it a hybrid game. I think it definitely is probably more skewed Euro, but I think that there are going to be some people that strictly because of the combat system would push back on it being a pure Euro. Although I will say that one of the improvements that was made between this game and Dwellings of Eldervale is the way that the slight difference in combat where you have, I'm trying to remember the name of how they put it mechanically. Do you remember the name of that? The targeting. Thank you. The targeting. Yeah. That little change, I think, is going to alleviate some of the concerns that people had with Dwellings of Eldervale's combat. It's a small change, but very significant, I feel.
Yeah. Combat is, I love combat because it's so, I mean, the rulebook dedicates several pages to it. But in practice, it's like anyone playing a negotiation card. No, anyone playing attack cards. How much energy are you spending? Let's roll our dice. Hey, combat's over. And it's not so punishing because if I go to a spot, we're going to fight, I still get to take the action, which, I mean, I would hate that. If you couldn't take the action, I'd be really annoyed.
Right.
But you can take the action. If you lose, not great in one aspect because you have to send your ships to the thing, but you're going to get them back. You just can't, when you return them, use the modules that they put on. And there's also benefits for losing. And if you slot that with a good moon, yeah.
Yes.
So that to me, I really enjoy this game. But I do want to, my favorite thing about this game by far is this is in worker placement games, and there's thousands of them probably at this point in time. They're all fun because you put your workers out and get to do something cool. And Dwellings of Eldervale did this a little bit, but this one even more so is the most fun game in the world, I think, to pull your workers off the board.
Right.
You put them on your modules, and you can get those modules connected with moons in between them. You can set your green modules up because the way green modules work is if you activate the first one, they all activate. You can make a ton of those. It's just so satisfying. You pulled it off. And I'm like, okay, take your turn. I don't care. I'm just going to sit here and play with my modules for a bit. And it's marvelous.
It's the one thing about worker placement, again, is pulling that back almost sounds like a wasted turn. It's like, okay, I'm gonna just bump this.
It's the best turn.
It's the best turn here. I mean, because you're looking forward to that regroup. And I found myself kind of doing it early because I'm like, man, I want to activate these and get that. It fixes the problem I didn't know was there for a lot of worker placement games for me.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually, Joey. Because, that usually typically is you're kind of like, oh, well, this is basically a pass. And in this one, you're trying to, sometimes it's like, I don't want to rush pulling my ships back because I want to do that turn because it's such a satisfying thing. There's a really nice kind of efficiency game that you can get into where you're doing it at what you feel like is exactly the right time, and that just feels so solid when you pull it off, especially, as you said, Tom, if you have set up those moons that you're going to be getting by going to certain planets, so that they are just triggering this incredible, chaining action type of a feel. It's just really, really well done. As you said, it was implemented in Dwellings of Eldervale, and also I believe in Cryo, another one of Luke Laurie's games, he kind of had that feel. But this, I think, is the best implementation of that system yet.
Yeah, this game has a lot of things. I mean, I could talk for a long time about what things I like. I like the diversity between the different alien races. You pick an alien race.
Yes.
It gives you different starting abilities and a special power, but also that special ship that's yours. And one thing I really like about the game is that even if you did do that, the 4 basic ships, you get an upgrade for them, and they're different than everyone else's. Mm-hmm. But it's all good different. I might look at yours and go, I wish I had that one, I guess, but I'm going to be happy with the one I have here now. And then the 4 ships themselves all have very different things. Your weakest ship is the only one that can be turned into buildings, and it's also the one you have the most of. Your battleship's a monster when it comes to combat. Your science one is the only one that can go up into nebulas and find the amazing moons up there. And
I just like that. Like from out the gate, I'm different than everyone else, but it's not the difference where I have to sit there and go, what do you do again? I don't need to worry about everyone else's special abilities. I'm just concentrating on my own, and I'm having a great time.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It is a game that is pretty far on the asymmetric side, but you don't feel like you have to teach that up front. Because that's oftentimes a problem with games that have asymmetry in them, is that you kind of have to teach all of those different things at the front end. You don't have to do that here at all. You kind of can see what the other players can do. You might ask them, what benefit does your fighter have now? That kind of a thing. But it's not going to usually change what you do. It might impact what cards you might play if you're in a combat with them, something like that. But you don't have to front load as much information. And I also think that carries over to the scoring as well. I think that the scoring system is simplified here. The hardest part to teach, I felt, with Dwellings of Eldervale was kind of the interaction of your guild kind of tracks and how that played into your scoring and how it impacted the number of cards you could have, your scoring cards. That really has kind of been removed in Andromeda's Edge, and I feel like it's much for the better. Scoring is easier to explain and understand.
Yeah, I agree about the scoring. It works really well. Moving up the tracks is easier and faster in this game. There's a few things that I'm not a huge fan of, but they're also very much, you can take them out. For example, the event deck. There's multiple event decks. One of them is benign events. They're always going to bring out the bad guys, which, oddly as it sounds, the bad guys never bothers me. I'm like, ooh, juicy target coming out.
Yep.
Let's go get that guy. I mean, there's some that are hard and will get you, but there's like benefits for killing them and all. But there's the events that come there. Everyone gets a resource or everyone does something. But you can also use a deck of negative events. I hate those so very much.
Yeah,
I'll never use them because I don't have to.
Because this game seems to be like a whole game of stepping up. Even when you lose a battle, you step up, and that just takes away from that for me. You're right.
Yeah, but I don't have to do it,
Right.
so I'm okay with that.
Right.
If I don't like a certain bad guy ship, you can also go, we just won't play with it. You're playing with only 4 per game, A, B, C, D. The one is always, I think the A's are always the same or very close to the same. But the other ones, if you say, well, that ship just made the game unfun, then take it out. You don't have to play with it, and I'm a big fan of that.
I think it's a smart design decision, actually, because this is catered to different type of play styles, different types of play groups. You and I, Tom, I'll never play with those negative cards if I'm choosing or if I'm part of that choice. But there are certain play groups that those negative cards are going to be their favorite part of the game. Certain of those, those ships that you or I may not particularly like, it may be their favorite ship in the game. It has a wide range of play styles that it can appeal to. And so I think it's smart that they put them in there. I think it's smart that they kind of labeled them and said, hey, these cards are going to be for people that like this type of negative direct interaction. This is going to be for people who want more of a positive interaction. So I think it's smart to have them in there. I really do, even if I'm not going to choose to ever play with them.
And another thing they allow you to change is the length of the game. And in my opinion, the game is perfectly fine at the lowest length because it's a good size. I played a 4-player game that took 2 hours, not counting setup and rules teach. That was my first game. And I don't know that I would often want to play 4 players, not because of the 2-hour time length, but just because I want to go faster on my turns. I'm excited about my turns. But I don't think it's unreasonable a 4-player game. I would never play with 5. But 2 and 3 works really well. 2, you're like, is there enough combat? Well, between the other player and the NPC ships, there's a lot going on. But I do like that they let you adjust that length. It's a simple thing, just how far when someone hits a certain number of points. And it's really funny because your first playthrough, after a couple turns, you're going to go, this game's never going to end. But then the points just start piling in from those event cards going off.
Yes, I agree with you that I probably am, just because of the way that I've been playing games recently, I'm going to go for the short game. It felt very satisfying. It did not feel like it ended early. I felt like I was still able to accomplish a lot of things. So for my personal preference, it's going to be the short game. But this is a game that has that epic kind of game day feel to it. And if you wanted to play a medium or long game, you have that option, and you can get more of this feeling of this, kind of slowly evolving type of game. In the short game, like you said, it feels like it's going to be slow, but it ramps up like this. In the medium, long game, it's going to be more of a gentle curve. I mean, I'm sure there's still going to be build up at the end. I have not played the long game, but I think it's just going to be the intensity of the arc.
Right. I think the short packs more of a punch for me, is why I gravitate to that. But that being said, player count wise, I think this is great. I played it 2, 3, and 4, and I like all the player counts. Depending on how much time you have, I think they all pack that same punch for me, which is a rarity when it can play at 4 and 2, and I enjoy the game just as much.
Yeah, it's a rarity for me when a big space game like this works well with 2.
Right.
And this one does. So there are some minor things that, like I said, the setup it's a bit the setup, right? And you got the Kickstarter, there's all these little modules that I have to almost kind of sweep away, although there's the one module that warp with the random die.
Yes.
Whatever that was called, I really like that nebula that just gives you a random thing. There's player cards, that deck of action cards that just can have all kinds of wild stuff going on, but all that stuff is contained. It really works for me, this game, because at the end of the day, there's fun combat, but it's not debilitating too much when you lose. You can recover from anything. The game ramps pretty quickly. If you upgrade a ship, you also get that ship for free. And guess what? You never need to build it again.
Right.
At the beginning of the game, when you get your first moon, you go, I don't know, am I going to have enough resources? Should I turn this in? It doesn't seem like much. And then after 5 or 6 turns, you're like, I'm rich, And building the modules, moving on tracks. I like everything about this game. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here about comparing this to Dwellings of Elder Vale, but I think this one fixes a lot of stuff that one did. And I don't think that game's bad. I really like Dwellings of Elder Vale, but I also like this theme better. I like the space theme better. The only thing that Dwellings of Elder Vale let me do that was better is it let me take over a monster, control it, even though that was a very complicated thing to do. But this one, it's just so much fun. It's different every play. There's so many avenues to victory. So this one for me is a 9 out of 10. I really enjoy it. It looks bigger than it is, but at the same time, it's as big as it looks, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't tell, if I put this out, some people are going to be like, oh, no. I'm like, no, you can get it. If you can understand Agricola, you're going to get Andromeda's Edge, because everything makes sense as it flows through. So I just really am enjoying this one and can see myself playing it a lot in the future.
All right, for me, the one negative I have is the setup, and that's something that you really can't mitigate because it looks so good on the table. So it is worth it to set that up. And it's one of those worker placement that, like I said, fixes a problem I never knew I had. And it's an epic worker placement. It's got the battle mechanic, which I love. And I'm coming at 9.5 on this because I love this game. This is my favorite space game, and I love worker placement. And this, again, that regroup action, something you look forward to, pulling your workers back, is just mind-blowing for me. It's really good. So I'm giving a 9.5 on this.
Well, a little bit of background. Dwellings of Elder Vale, I gave a 10 when I reviewed it a few years back. If I were to review it today, it would be at a 9, and that's strictly because of my play style. I have gone to more of the quicker games, a little bit simpler, quicker to set up and such. But for a big game like this is like it for me. It scratches all the itches. It checks all the boxes. I'm talking about Dwellings of Elder Vale. This is a better version of Dwellings of Elder Vale. I know we didn't want to get too caught up in comparing them, but they have a lot more in common than apart. So I'm with Joey at 9.5. again, it doesn't mean that I like this less than Elder Vale, because that was a 10 when I did it. It's where Elder Vale is now and where this is now. I like this slightly better. I'm theme ambivalent, to be honest with you. Neither theme is my favorite. So it's not that I like this better because it's in space. It's because I like it better because the changes that it made, I feel are net positive from a game that I already felt was outstanding. This is outstanding plus 9.5. Just a fantastic job all the way around.
Well, there you go, folks. That's Andromeda's Edge. Check it out. It's coming from Lucky Duck and Cardboard Alchemy. Luke Laurie, designer. Oh, and I'm sorry, Luke and his son, Maximus Laurie. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Joey Evans.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
To space and beyond. Is that right?
Close enough.
Yeah, I think so.